And joining us now to talk weather here this week, Eric Snodgrass of Nutrien back with us. Eric, great to catch up with you again, sir. Hope you had a good weekend.
Yeah, it's been chilly around here and a bit windy, but kind of finally feels like fall, so I'm not really complaining.
Yeah, I kind of got the fall feelings here too. And I know we're talking maybe some frost potential for some areas. We're going to touch on that in a minute. I want to start though with what is going on down in the Gulf. Hurricane Ian. You and I have been talking the last couple of weeks. We've been watching the tropics and waiting for a big system to come up. Well, we got a big system, Hurricane Ian. What's the latest that you're hearing about this storm set to impact parts of the southeast, Eric?
Yeah, well, one of the neat things that NOAA does whenever we see a system like this is they train their satellites right on top of it and they collect an image every minute. So I've been just mesmerized by watching some of the satellite imagery this morning. What I'm seeing a lot of what we call hot towers. And so that tells me that the system is developing quickly. Now, the models kind of honed in over the weekend on where they think this is going to go. And there's a front that's draping down over Florida that's going to possibly push in closer to Tampa Bay. Now, when I was a professor at the University of Illinois, one of the things I used to always do with my students when I taught them about severe and hazardous weather was I had them pick out cities along the Gulf Coast and the East Coast that they thought were most vulnerable to hurricanes. And they never picked the city that I say is most vulnerable, and that is unfortunately Tampa. Tampa's very rarely hit from the west. In fact, the last time this happened was 1968 with Hurricane Gladys. And if you take a look here, we can see that these hurricanes, when they come out of the west, would push their storm surge into Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay and the surrounding area has about 3 million people and very low elevation, which means the flood threat there is very high. Most forecasts suggest that this could get up to Category 3 or stronger as it approaches Florida, which means wind speeds approaching 130 miles an hour are possible. But it'll be the remnants of this as it gets into parts of Georgia, then eventually pushes even farther to the north, maybe bringing an inch, maybe 2 inches of rain to parts of Tennessee, getting into Kentucky, pushing over toward the Appalachian Mountains. Now, it won't be the strong winds at that point, like the hurricane force, of course, but it'll be windy and we'll have some wetter conditions there. So the remnants of this possibly making it as far north as the Ohio River Valley. But if you're outside of that area, this next week is dry. And so a lot of folks really making a lot of progress on harvest.
Yeah, a lot of folks making a lot of progress on harvest. That is true. We're going to continue to watch Hurricane Ian and the impacts down in the southeast, but let's talk a little bit more about harvest. And I know here the last week or so, we've seen some frost across parts of the northern plains, and we have more potential here coming up over the next few days. Eric, talk to us about what you're seeing.
Yeah, so we've seen frost touch a few different areas coming out of the northern plains into like the upper Midwest. So that includes Wisconsin, Minnesota, the UP of Michigan, even lower Michigan. And there's been some frost in western Nebraska as well. What we talk about here is that we've touched frost. We've had temperatures hit like 30, 31, 32 for just maybe an hour or so, which means sometimes in that canopy, the crop canopy, the temperatures didn't get there. And maybe the crop didn't really have any damage from it. Or thankfully, a lot of the crop has matured along and is past, for example, corn past black layer, which means it's no longer vulnerable. But the question is, with this deeper cold air that's over the Great Lakes right now, where do we see a frost over the next few days? And the day I'm going to be watching most carefully is going to be Wednesday morning. So we see here that from the Red River Valley of the North getting into Minnesota, possibly clipping a big section of Iowa, north and northwestern Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan. Those are all areas that could see, again, the temperatures touch 32. So if they get to that 32-degree mark, you got to spend time there. You need a freeze if we're going to have damage. And a frost is when you just touch that 32. So is it a little early? Possibly. Normally we get fully into that first full week of October before we start talking about frosts in much of Iowa, northern Illinois. The normal first frost date where I am in central Illinois is it's October 15th to the 17th, and we're not seeing a frost here just yet. But we got cold air in place, and it's actually that cold air that's actually going to push Ian away as well.
Well, and that's something we're going to be watching very closely and see if there is any of that damage. But overall, again, as you mentioned, fairly dry this week, fairly good harvest weather across the country, and I know we've already seen some fairly good harvest progress here the last couple of days as well, Eric.
Yeah, we did. And I got a chance to drive across Illinois a bit this weekend, and I saw just combines rolling, just trying to get the crop out as quickly as they can, because the windows are open for a lot of folks. So if there's a window and you've got the manpower, the folks are going after it.
Well, Eric, let's talk a little bit about South America. Let's shift our focus down there. We continue to watch as they are ramping up their planting season in the Southern Hemisphere. What's the latest on the weather outlook for South America?
Yeah, so October is that critical month, especially in big states like Mato Grosso. So if they plant fast, what it does is it opens up the whole crop calendar, right? The issues we're seeing right now is that it's quite wet in parts of southern and south central Brazil. So it's like Mato Grosso do Sul over toward Paraná, Sao Paulo, getting into Minas Gerais. We're seeing near normal rainfall in parts of Mato Grosso, especially western Mato Grosso. But the monsoon has yet to advance over into like eastern Mato Grosso, into Bahia, Tocantins, these areas, which are also set to get a pretty fast planting through the month of October. Where it's dry is along the Paraná River down in Argentina. That's been a place that's also been cold. We've had some issues with drought developing down there that have hit the winter wheat crop. So I think the big thing that we'll be watching here is if La Nina continues to strengthen, which it most certainly has been doing over the last couple of weeks and will continue to do in the month of October, we could see drought issues south, whereas the monsoon gets really going north. So we're going to split South America north-south, troubles farther to the south, quick planting progress to the north.
Well, Eric, looking across the rest of the globe, any other issues you're seeing? Anything else you're kind of keeping an eye on here as we work through the week ahead?
Yeah, really quickly here, Australia, better rains for the next month. They're going into spring with plenty of soil moisture. We also see that in Southeast Asia, while a typhoon is approaching, it's not going to make its way inland, which possibly means drought conditions continue from there to parts of the Yangtze River. In India, a late monsoonal surge is happening right now, which means above average precipitation. And across Europe, from Ukraine to the Russian wheat belt, Belarus, we do see more than normal fall rains at this point for that area, which was going to be good for winter wheat, but not so good for harvest. I think the biggest concern I have over Europe is and we talked about this last week, but if these forecasts verify, much of Western Europe could be colder than normal this winter, and that could really put a major strain on our energy markets. And for those folks there trying to just stay warm during winter.
Well, a lot of things to watch. We'll continue to keep our eyes on it. You can sign up for Eric's daily weather newsletter as well on our website, markettalkag.com. With that, Eric Snodgrass of Nutrien, always appreciate the insight, sir. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, sounds good. You too.